Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Self Taught Garage. This video, I filmed a little over a week ago. And anyways, my phone storage got full. I couldn't find the trash to empty it, so I actually just currently did that and freed up a ton of memory, about 3 gigabytes actually. So just did that because I film a lot of these with my phone because my phone has a pretty good camera. But as you can tell, I'm filling its memory relatively quickly, so we're probably about to change that. But anyways, for now, I'm still using the phone. But back to the point. I filmed this over a week ago, and in the process of trying to free up memory, I ended up deleting the intro. So that's what we are doing now, is filming a new intro. So anyways, in this video, I was trying to find a way to put a weight guard on the front of the mini tractor, or the garden tractor, whatever you want to call it. So we end up taking the brush guard off of the tiller because the drive gear and the tiller just disintegrated for some reason in the process of us using it in the video you all seen. So because of that, I took the brush guard off it. We do some modifications to it and make it to where we can mount it on the front of this little thing, the garden tractor, mini tractor, and be able to put, it's about a 25-pound weight that was actually on the tiller as well. And that's what we end up using on the front of this thing. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the video. Y'all can see the way I've kind of got this held on now. I've got a clothes hanger going to the exhaust, the heat shield on the exhaust, and then I have it bolted down here, but it's came loose, the bracket's bent all to heck, and then I have some hose clamps actually holding our weight on. So first things first, we're going to take all of this off, and then we're going to start figuring out how we're going to set this up in order to mount it on the front of our little tractor. And to be honest, I've debated on building a whole separate brush guard, one that kind of fits the width of the frame a little better, because I have the tubing. But as far as time is money thing, we're just going to go with what we got and try to make it look a little bit better and fit a little better. So I guess there ain't really much else to say other than I'm gonna start taking this apart. So, as you guys can see, this is how it mounted to the tiller, which it came loose. The welds have actually cracked in multiple places now. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this entire plate off, and we're going to grind the back side of our angle, I guess, kind of flat or cup it a little bit. So that way we can butt it up against this and do a good solid weld all along the bottom. So regardless of if the mounting plate decides to bend or what have you, the weld will never break and we won't have to worry about that anymore. So I guess what we're going to do now is we're going to get this cut off and we're going to clean this area up, and we're going to start prepping to get our angle on there. Alright, so I've done measured the front end of the mini tractor there, and it comes out to 10 3/4, so we're going to cut this at 11, and it'll give us a little bit of overhang, about an 1/8 inch on each side, because that'll help keep the frame cleaned up and protected. Alright, so now that we got our marks made, I'm going to go get our straight edge. I'm going to straight edge it to make sure I cut a straight line. Then we're going to get to cutting that off. And then I'll bring y'all back and we're going to start working on how we're going to get it mounted to that there, because I cut in a little too deep with the grinder and ended up punching a hole in it. Not a big deal. That's pretty thick tubing, so it's still salvageable. And honestly, I was figuring we were going to have to put a flat face on part of it to get it to mount like securely, because we are going to be hanging weights off of it. So, like I said, gonna go grab straight edge. We're gonna mark our lines, and then we're going to get to cutting. I'm going to start looking at how we're going to get this all mounted up. Oh, sorry about that. Thought I was recording. Well, I got our piece cut, and what I was going to say is, got the grinding wheel put on, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start cleaning this surface up here. We're going to get everything clean. We're going to clean up our piece of angle, which this is 2" by 2" angle iron, and our bolt holes on that go to 1 1/4" or 1 3/4" back, so that gives us more than enough for our angle to sit over top of that. It'll give us plenty of overlap, front and top and front, so that way we don't get any flex in our mount. So we're going to clean all this up, we're going to clean this up, and then we're going to start addressing how we're going to get it attached. And to save y'all from watching me do a bunch of grinding, I will bring you back after I get all this done. Something that I am going to have to do, because I just set this up there to get a look at how everything was going to sit, is our oil drain plug is about right there. That's why I made those marks, and it's keeping us from being able to slide our 2" angle all the way back. So what we are going to do is, first off, we're going to try to make it straight, clean, look like it was meant to happen. We're going to take our straight edge, we're going to make 2 lines going all the way across, which obviously we're not cutting this entire section out, but we are going to be cutting part of it. So we got our lines going all the way across, and what I want to do now is I want to have a nice clean arched area right there, so that way when we drain the oil has somewhere to go instead of all over the frame, because there is a drain hole that's pre-existing already on this frame. So we're just going to use this marker cap to help us get our line made, which it's a little small, but as you can see, just shimmy it over, and you can continue using the marker to get a nice clean arch. And there's obviously more than one line here. There's a little bit of oil on it, but you can tell which line is the line we're using and which line isn't. You can just judge it from what's straight and what's not straight. So that's going to be what we're going to cut out for our oil drain plug and our oil drain hole, so our used oil can run out of the frame and not get everywhere. That's something I figured I'd show y'all real quick. But now I'm going to go ahead and get this cut out, and after that we'll be about ready to start coming up with a plan on how to mount this. A little trick I'll share with y'all real quick that I've learned over time is, if you're going to be cutting something out like this, which obviously I still haven't gotten the arch, but I've got the square itself or the box made. This is what I do. You cut your straight lines, then you come in right to the end of your lines, put a little notch, flip it over, put a notch on the opposing side. Then you can use pliers. I like these self-adjustable wrenches to do this, because I can just put pressure in the right places, but anything will work that you can grab it with. And just like that, it's out. Now we can take our grinding wheel and start getting our arch made in there, and we're good to go. So we got our little archway made. Now the only other issue that we're having with this fitting is we're hitting the engine by just a hair, and it's not allowing this plate to get butted up all the way against the front half of our little mini tractor back there. So we need to cut roughly 1/8 of an inch, a little less, out of this bar right here, just off of the front, so that way it sits around that front edge of the bottom half of the engine. And I kind of like the idea of that, because that'll give it a form fit, keep it from being able to shimmy left and right. It'll hold it square and exactly where we want it to be every single time. No matter if we take it on and off 100 times, it will always get put back right in the same place because of our notches. So that's what I'm going to do now. We're just going to take a little bit off at a time and constantly check fitment until we finally get it the way I like it, and then we get to move on to welding this bar up. Alright, so now we got our notch made. It fits up in there nice. It fits square. We got the same amount of overhang on each side. So next thing we're going to do is, before we weld our the little brush guard or weight bracket on, it's a multi-use thing, we're going to mark our holes so that way we can go ahead and drill them out now, because that'll be a lot easier than once we get it fully assembled. So next thing is, I'm going to put this up there. I'm going to get a fine point permanent marker, so that way I can reach up from the underside of the frame, mark where our bolt holes need to be drilled out, so that way we can get them drilled out. I have 4 mounting holes that I could use on this, but we're just going to drill out 2, and we're going to use those 2. And then later on, when I go to put the grill back on along with the brush guard, I will obviously remark the holes for the grill mount and drill them out, so that way we can mount the grill on here while having the brush guard on as well. So like I said, I'm going to mark them holes. We're going to get them drilled out, and then I'll bring y'all back and we'll start setting up how we're going to weld this on. Is we're going to get our holes drilled. I've measured the holes. They are 3/8 in diameter. So we got our step bit, and we're going to take it to 3/8. And these holes go all the way to 1 1/4 inches to the back side. So we're going to double check our measurement to make sure the back half of that hole is 1 1/4 inches, because the way where we want our bolts to mount is in the front portion of these holes. So that way it doesn't allow this brush guard to be pulled forward or anything else, because it ain't going to be able to be pushed back because we have the faceplate for our mount. So the only direction it could go is forward, so we want to make sure we get our holes put in the right spot, so that way this plate cannot be moved forwards or backwards, and that'll eliminate any play that could possibly end up into our brush guard / weight bracket. So I just paused the video there and I ran over, and where we want our hole to be put is 1 3/4 inches. And that's precisely where we have our dots, actually. So we're going to go right to where our dots are made on the back side of our plate here. We're going to take it to a 3/8 hole at 1 3/4 inches back from our front bracket. And before we punch all the way through, I'm going to double check our measurement to make sure we're still at 3/4 inch. I said 1 3/4 inches before that, but it's 3/4 inch. So, like I said, we're going to dot both of these at 3/4 inch. Double check that they are in the right place, which is 3/4 inch. And we're going to go ahead and punch it through. Thing I will say about step bits that I do really like is how you can get a chamfer on every hole you drill by just letting the next step kind of hit the hole. And what I mean by chamfer is it gives you that nice little recessed beveled edge, or whatever you want to call it. Makes the hole real smooth. It takes all the burrs off. That's something I've just always really liked about step bits. It makes the holes look so much better on anything you're making. Alright, instead of a 3/8, I ended up going up to a 7/16 diameter, which that's just one size up as far as step bits go. So I went the next size up, and the only reason is in case the holes are off left or right, it'll give us that little bit of room just in case, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take our flap disc, I'm going to clean up this entire surface real well. Clean off this back edge the best I can, kind of take that sharp corner off, just kind of flatten it off, so that way we have something that we can stick our tubing on and weld it. And then we're going to address our tubing, and what I've decided we're going to have to do, where I cut it a little too deep, getting those welds off for that old mounting plate. Alright, so as you can see, we got our bracket. We had to reshape that part right there. As you can see, I was getting some clearance issues with the front of the engine, and we don't want this touching whatsoever. So I just went ahead and kind of ground all that back a little bit, which now it kind of looks weird, but we're going to leave it there anyhow. And then the bottom of the tube, we ended up actually cutting a little bit out of in order to get the angle that I was looking for. And honestly, it's just a better surface area for the weld. It'll give it a little more meat as far as the tubing goes to hang on to. And then our plate is right there in place and ready to go. So I just killed the battery and the grinder. I killed both batteries, so I'm gonna have to let everything charge up before I can actually weld this. So it may be tomorrow before I actually get it to where it's welded and we finalize this and show you all everything I've came up with. So until then, we'll see y'all tomorrow, but for you, you won't even have to wait. Alright guys, it's a new day, but where we left off yesterday, which I guess is still in this video where we left off in the last clip. Anyways, yesterday for me was we were fixing to start welding this up. I got it all ground down, got the angles right and all that. But before we do any of the welding, I figured I'd show you all the way I got this pipe ground down in order to make everything work together. Because the goal is, even though I have this brush guard on, is to still be able to put the grill on as well. So that's something else we're going to tackle in this video. I'm going to weld some, I think they're 2.25 inch bolts onto the frame of the little mini tractor or garden tractor. So that way we can set the mount for our brush guard, just pick it up, drop it on the studs, take our grill, drop it on top of the studs, and then just bolt both of them down. So that way we have the brush guard / weight bar and our grill and hood, because honestly I've never had the grill and hood on this because I've always had the snow plow on it. But the grill and hood is at the house, and I also restored them as well, sanded them down, put new coats of paint on all of it, so the whole thing has a matching color scheme. It looks good, I like it, and I'd love to be able to put it all together. I just haven't ever been able to, so that's something we're going to address. So something I did just do, not on camera, is I ported the exhaust on this because I haven't mentioned it, but I'm going to get an aftermarket carburetor and air breather on the, oh my goodness, getting tongue-tied. An aftermarket carburetor and air filter to put on this as well, because that's another reason why the grill and hood aren't on. They don't fit with the factory carburetor, but these aftermarket ones, it's a Mikuni carburetor and then an air filter and jet kit from GoPowersports.com. We're going to be throwing them on there as well, so that way our factory grill and hood can fit with this bigger engine. So that's something we're going to be doing in a later video. Obviously, I got to order those parts, but it's $100 for that stuff. So I mean, it's not breaking me to do it. So, but anyways, for this video, let's get back to doing what we were doing, which is welding this brush guard / weight bar back on to, I guess, our mount we made up yesterday. So I guess I'll show y'all how I came up with the way to get it all set up and leveled out, and then we'll get to welding. Alright, the garage is kind of a mess, and I apologize for that. Move some of this stuff out of the way because I didn't clean up yesterday, just in case there were still some things we needed to work on. And I will shut that door so the wind stops from slamming it. So you remember this piece that we made up yesterday? We got all of our angles made and etc. Got our holes drilled. And then this is what I ended up doing with the tubing, is I essentially cut about half of it off, maybe a little less. But now it sits up against our mounting plate we made, which those lines are just to show me. So I always put the grill back in the same place. Put it up on our mounting plate, it sits flush now, so that way I can get a little better surface contact for the weld. And it holds it at the angle we need. And I'm gonna take this bracket, stick it up just a little over the edge there, as you can see, hopefully. And then I'm going to weld it, so when I grind down that weld and get ready to paint it, it'll be like a smooth transition into the pipe on the top side. So just so aesthetically from the top it looks good. Y'all know how I am. So that's what we're going to do. That's our game plan. So I'm going to get to doing it. And yes, I'm using a tape measure to kind of prop it up, so that way I keep it in the right position. It's the only thing I could find that actually made it sit the way I want it to sit. So that's what we're using. And of course, before we fully weld this, we're going to put 2 tacks on it. Well, probably more than that because it's kind of a thin thing, but we're going to put multiple tacks on it. And then we will test fit it, and then we'll weld her solid. So I still got to get my helmet and everything, and I'm probably going to put you on a little time lapse here as usual, and we'll come back after we get everything tacked up and do the test fit. Something else I'm not sure if I'd mentioned, but those pipes don't exactly line up at the bottom either. So while we're doing all the tack welds and whatnot on this, we're going to tack weld the side that's lower first, and then we're going to get that other side and we're going to try to force it down just a hair and get a tack weld on it, so that way those pipes line up. Because once we go to finish weld this, I'm planning on bridging the gap in the middle of that tubing, which you can see right there, that little gap. So I'm probably going to weld that solid too to help keep moisture and everything else out of it, because other than that right at the bottom, there's nowhere for moisture to be able to get into this tubing at all. It's other than that one spot, it's solid. So like I said, we're probably going to make that solid as well while we're at it. But other than that, I'm going to get to doing the tack welds. Alright. Also, I got some of these Kevlar sleeves. Yeah, they're still not gloves, but we're getting there. I've been getting welders burn real bad on my arms where we're coming out of winter, and I was very, very pasty. But we're working on fixing that now. So, alright. Like I said, we're going to put a tack on this side first, because this side is actually the lower side, or the tubing's a hair lower on that side. And we're going to do our tacks to the outside edge of this also, which I wasn't sure if I told you all. But we're going to put our tacks over on the far sides. And then we're going to do one big tack right here in the center of both of these pipes. What I'm doing now is trying to get it as centered as possible, because there's just a little bit of overhang on each side, and that's all we want. It's just that little bit of overhang. So I did have my speed square over here, but it is missing, which, like I said, there's more than one of us that work out of this garage, so we're just going to take this extension here and do our best to make sure it's about the same, and it's actually pretty close. So I think this is where we're going to weld it. Give it a little bump over, because just a hair of difference, and that's pretty perfect. So we're going to get our tacks put on, then we're going to test fit. One more right here in the center. All right, now we're going to test fit and make sure we got our angle right. There we go, we got clearance, nothing's hitting each other, our holes are lined up. So I think right here's it. So we're going to go ahead and finish weld this out. We should be ready to rock. Of course, it's a little offset from the engine, but the engine hangs real hard to the right or the left hand side of this thing. So that's why it's not centered with the engine. The engine is offset to this side, so I figured I'd just throw that out there so you all knew. Alright, but now that we got our tacks done, we no longer need our tape measure to keep us level. We're going to go ahead and clean up where we tacked, because this is a flux wire. This is a flux wire. You can see all that residual flux on top of this thing. So as you can guess, we're going to have to knock that flux off with a wire wheel real quick, and then we'll be ready to finish weld this top half. But before we go through and finish weld the top, we're going to have to flip it over and put a couple tacks on the bottom so the metal doesn't start to flex and warp. And as you can see, you just take the flux off with a wire brush. A lot of times I like using the toothbrush ones, which they're the really small wire brushes. I call them the toothbrush wire brushes because they're similar in size. But like I said, first things first, we're going to go to this bottom side, try to get it welded up. But unfortunately, this bottom side, quite a big gap, so we're gonna have to work for it. Here we go. Rotate it, and we're going to start getting around to the back side, but first there's an area right here that I need to get. All right. This back side, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get, because, hang on, let me get you all flipped around. As you can see, there's a pretty major gap right there. So I'm thinking I'm gonna have to get a piece of scrap metal to kind of bridge that gap, because right there it's actually pretty substantial. To get that tack, it actually took me about 35 seconds, I would guess, 30 to 45 seconds. And it was just building up filler material just to get that tack to reach. So before we go on, I'm going to go check my scrap pile and see if I have something that I can put there to fill up that gap. Alright, so I couldn't find anything just scrap-wise laying around that was big enough. So we're going to use some of our 1-inch flat stock here. And as you can see, it kind of sits really nice, actually. I like the way that's going to look as far as the bottom side goes, welding it in at this angle like that so the bottoms meet. So we're not going to go the whole length, obviously. We're just going to cut enough to where we're at the bottom of the angle of the tubing on this side. So I'm going to put a mark where we want our flat stock to sit. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to do the same thing. Right where this arch starts to cut up, that's where we're going to cut it off. So I'm going to put 2 marks here, so once we cut, we know where we want our flat stock at. Going to mark it on top as well. Mark it over here on top. And we're just going to make a little rough line here. Like that. And now we know where to cut. And that's literally how I am going to cut it. We'll just roughly make a line. And we're going to chop it off. So I'll be bringing y'all back after I get this cut. And we're ready to start welding again. Alright, so as you can see, got the piece cut. So the only thing to do now is we're going to take it to the flap disc. And we're just going to knock some of that paint off. And one of the ends has some rust on it. So we're going to get all that cleaned up. We're probably going to hit the pipe again up a little higher so we can get that surface cleaned. Right up there. And we'll get to welding it up. I feel like I've mentioned this in other videos, but what I like to do for cleaning metal is I keep these worn out flap discs, the ones that I've used quite a bit, and take them over metal surface because it helps get them real clean without eating up the material that you're trying to clean off. So that's a little something I figured I'd just let y'all ponder on, because these flap discs, you know, they're about $3-4 a piece, so why not keep them? Even though they're worn up, they're still good. They still clean material. They just don't get rid of material as quickly. So that's something I just wanted to throw out there for y'all. All right. So as you can see, we got everything cleaned up. As far as our surfaces and whatnot, let me get this propped up a little better for y'all to see. Make sure we are still in frame. Okay. So as you can see, we got the surface cleaned up. We cleaned up about halfway around our piping, this whole front edge here. Our marks, I didn't actually grind off, so they're still visible. And about right there is where I am going to weld it. Which, as you can tell from the video, I'm a little off of this forward edge. So once again, once I grind down the weld for paint, it'll look like it's meant to be. And then up here, it's right into the start of that top round off, or starting to round off the top half there. So once again, we can weld it there as well. And then we only have a little bit of our gap to actually clean up. And that is something I'm actually pleased with. It takes a little bit of the welding out for me. The downside is we're going to have these big openings on each side. I haven't exactly thought of what we're going to do with that. I may just leave them. But ultimately, we may end up cutting a couple more little triangle pieces to stick on these ends to cap that off. Once again, just to help keep water out so we don't get a bunch of rust later on. But off while that flux is still on there. Alright. The only thing I hate about this welder is all that spatter or splatter you get everywhere. I absolutely hate that, but because I wouldn't grind my welds if it wasn't for all that splatter, man. I wouldn't. Some of these, I like the look of them. Like this weld's pretty nice the way it is. It doesn't necessarily need grinded, but because of all the splatter, we are going to have to grind it. And there you have it. And you can see something else with these flux wires. That flux cakes on, man, and it is awful to get out. But it is what it is. So next thing we're going to do is this top seam. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use this to help prop it up. And I'm going to make sure you all are still in frame. And you are. So we are going to get at it. Alright, so now while we're at it and we got this propped up the way it is, we're going to go ahead and hit this gap right here and try to get it closed up, which I'm going to have to turn the amperage way down. So that way it ain't about, because this right here isn't about penetration, it's just about plugging the hole. So we're going to weld it that way. Which the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to take a bead across this side and then a bead across this side, and by that point they should be met up. As you can see, I'm just very quickly running along the end of this tubing. Because as you can tell, even though my amperage is turned very low, it's actually still burning through it. So we're just doing a couple speed welds here. And the only reason for it is, like I said, plug the gap. And then when we grind it down, we'll make it look like it was never it never did have a seam in it whatsoever. And like I said, the only point for doing that is to help keep moisture out of this, to keep it from rusting out. Because this tubing isn't very thick, so we're doing everything we can in order to prolong its life. And that right there looks more than good enough to me. They're very ugly welds, but like I said, we just turned down the amperage to a bare minimum. And sole purpose was just to close the gap. Now we'll run the flap disc over it, and by the time we're done, you'll never know there was a gap there to begin with. So, next thing is we need to address these edges here, which this side, like I did the other before I started welding out the plate, I'm just going to wrap the side, and after that we might just be able to plug this hole with weld. It'll look like crap, but it'll plug. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this side, see how big of an area we have to fill up or finish welding, and then we'll go from there. Turn all that back on. spin it around, do the same to this other side. Like I said, we're just gonna weld this out right here. I'm hoping we're in frame. I'm not getting up to check this time, so if you all missed this part, I'm sorry, but we're doing the same thing as we did on the other side. Now that we've got that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go check my nut and bolt drawer, because I believe I can put a small nut in each end of this in that little triangle shape we got going on. Hence why I put the welds on the inside of that edge there and up at the top. Just kind of round it off so I can stick a small nut, which it's going to be an old rusty nut for sure. I'm just going to use a scrap one. We're just going to shove it in there and we're going to weld around it. And that is how we're going to plug that up. Alright, that other side I ended up having to weld shut. There was too much splatter and everything in the way. This side I was able to get a piece of an old chewed up bolt in. So that's how we're going to get this side closed. The other side I just welded shut. And I'm just going to have to work at cleaning up with the grinder after this. But this side, obviously, piece of a bolt. Alright, and as you can see, even though it was old and rusty, we were more than able to weld it up. Alright, but it looks like we are welded all the way around. There's a few little spots I'm going to have to hit real quick. Alright, so that, and we still got a little hole here. Let me go ahead and fill that up in our gap. Alright, we got that. Another little spot. Now, we've got her done. So what we're going to do now, we're going to let all of this cool. We're going to let it cool off. And once it's cooled off, we're going to come back. I'm going to go over everything with the grinder. And we'll get her all cleaned up and mounted up and painted. Alright, so camera was done. I had to put y'all on the charge, but as you can tell, I didn't stop working. This little tab here is something I just added, and that is what is going to hold our weight. Unfortunately, I kind of welded it the wrong direction, but it'll still hold the weights the way we want. They'll just be pointed a different direction. As you can see, it cleaned up pretty nice. I wasn't worried about getting it like clean because we're painting it as well, but everything sits the way it's supposed to sit, so on and so forth. The only issue with me mounting the type of weight that I'm going to be using the side to side like that is, it's going to put a whole lot of top load on our mount, or our little brush guard that we made. So I'm glad that I actually put that extra piece of flat stock in. That's going to help brace it all up. But before we paint it, what we are going to do right now is I'm going to get this thing mounted up, and we're going to take a and have a look at it. Make sure it all mounts good, the weights sit right, there's nothing interfering with each other, and then we'll go ahead, get it painted, and finalize this, which honestly I'm probably going to paint this off camera, but I will be sure to show it to you in the outro. So anyways, let's get to getting this thing mounted up, seeing how it looks. Alright, I paused the recording there, but we got the base bolted on. Now we're tightening up the weight. Then we're going to take it for a drive, make sure everything works the way we hope it works. And then I'm going to get it painted. And we'll go from there. Alright, so there you see it. And the upside to having that weight there as well is it's got kind of like a rubber plastic type coating on it. So we also got a little push bumper going on. So like I said, gonna take it for a ride, see how it does. And after that, we're gonna start wrapping this little project up. So as y'all just seen, we got this thing painted. We've tested it out, rode around with it, just to make sure it wasn't going to vibrate like crazy or anything else. Honestly, it turned out pretty good in my opinion. I mean, yeah, it could always be better. There are improvements that can be made. It could be made more useful, things like that. We could make different things for it, different attachments, so that way possibly put a ball up here or something so we can move around the trailers and whatnot. But ultimately, it turned out pretty good. The paint's a little bit different than anything else I got, but I didn't have any matching paint to make it go with the whole color scheme, but all in all, it worked out. So, anyways, that was us making this old tiller brush guard to mount on the mini tractor or garden tractor, whatever you want to call it. So, brush guard weight bracket is done, and the way it's set up, we should still be able to get the grill and hood on after this. We might have to clean off this bracket right here, that bar. We may end up having to cut that off in order to fit the grill on, but like I said, that's nothing but a thing. If it comes to it, then we'll just take care of what we need to take care of in order to get it to fit properly. But anyways, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. And this is Self Taught Garage, and we will see y'all on the next one.